Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of Meeting Professionals International, Paul Van Devender, and the Chairman of IMAX, Ray Bloom.
How many hit the daily double? Who closed Dre's and is here this morning? Ugh. So it looks like I'm the only one. I am so excited to be here with you this morning and just privileged to be on the stage with Ray Bloom, the chairman of the IMAX Group. This event is just amazing. What a showcase for our industry. And if you think about in 4 years what Ray and Karina and the IMAX team have done to bring this together, it's fantastic. And at MPI, we are really pleased that we're a strategic partner with IMAX and that we're the education provider. And our education content this week has just been second to none. We had 39 different education sessions on Monday. In Smart Monday, we've had a great keynote speaker every day. We had over 2,000 people attend those education sessions, and that's what we're all about at MPI. We are about providing professional development and educational opportunities. So if you haven't been a member or you're not a member currently and you want to become one, please talk to us, talk to one of our current members or talk to one of our staff. Come visit us at our booth, and we've got a great offer for you there if you want to become a member while you're here at IMAX. So Ray, thank you so much for allowing us to be your partner and to be that education provider.
It's a pleasure, Paul, and we're delighted to be partners with you. I just want to really focus on a couple of highlights of the week. There are many, and we've still got another day to go. And first of all, though, I'd like to thank all of you for participating, you together with the many other thousands who are here this week, for joining us here at IMAX America. It's greatly appreciated. A couple of highlights I wanted to mention. One was really a momentous moment, I think, for our industry, and that was the interview with Bill Mcdermott on Tuesday, the chief executive of SAP, who launched his book, Winning Dreams, and joined us by satellite from New York. He spoke up so strongly for the meetings industry. I don't know of anyone ever in his position to speak so strongly about our industry. And moreover, he agreed to be a spokesman for our industry, which means speaking to his peers, which again has never happened before. So that was certainly a great highlight. The other highlight I'd like to mention, of course, is the show floor, where, of course, the activity has been immense. And what is very gratifying, the amount of business opportunities and business that's been discussed this week and will ensue over the next following months, over the next 12 months. So that obviously is critical to what we do here. And also, I can't really finish without mentioning last night. Those who were last night at the MPI rendezvous at Dre's, I mean, are you here yet? It was such a spectacular evening. Hope you had a lot of late nights. It was a fantastic evening in a spectacular venue. So it was wonderful. Paul?
You talk about the show floor, Ray.
Yeah.
And I've shared this with Ray. One of my first experiences in coming into this role was going to IMAX Frankfurt. And I remember coming down the escalator as you approach the show floor there, and I could hear this buzz coming up. And the energy level was intense, and I had never experienced anything like that in a show anywhere in the world. And then I got here, and I see he's replicated it. And these two shows just have a energy and a business transaction that gets done at no other level. And that business transaction was highlighted last night. Yes. It was really fantastic, and I want to thank everyone who supported us with our efforts at Dre's last night. That fundraising goes towards scholarships and grants to help individuals in this industry get better and improve themselves so they can add back to the industry. We don't have a final number yet, but that's going to be the largest single fundraising event we've ever done. We're well over $150,000 cleared towards scholarships from last night. It may even be a bigger number by the time we're done figuring all the numbers out. So thank you, everyone, for doing that. And Ray, thanks for letting us host it here.
It's a pleasure. That's great news, Paul. We're delighted. We want to see the foundation raising a great deal of money and everyone enjoying themselves at the same time. The partnership between IMAX and MPI, the strategic partnership and the year-long partnership, is very strong indeed. Of course, it manifests itself here at the show. The major education provider is MPI, but we work together year-round. And one of the areas we work on, which many of you will be aware of, is the Future Leaders Forum, together with our other partners, MCI. We now hold 15 of these all over the world. Thousands of young students have been through. Many are now joining our industry, and some are already leaders in our industry because we've been doing this for 13 years. So the partnership together with MPI is just fantastic. I think it's now time for our keynote, and I'd like to introduce today's sponsor. Isabel Meritorina is the PR director of Puebla in Mexico. Mexico are great friends of IMAX, and our great pleasure introducing Isabel, please. Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Very good morning to everybody. I hope everybody's up and at 'em for another day of meetings. On behalf of the governor of Puebla, Mexico, Rafael Moreno Valle, it is an honor to be here today and to be a part of IMEX America and to introduce aspiring person, which is Wendy Booker. Puebla has its own case of challenge for success, a demonstration of determination to create awareness against many odds. The state of Puebla today, through communal efforts, is in a position where it has never been before. Puebla is a World Heritage Site. It's recognized as the first colonial city in tourism growth in Mexico. We have an astounding increase in international tourism of 231% in just 3.5 years. We have obtained 6 new magical towns where we've had 1 for 10 years. We are considered by the San Francisco Chronicle as one of the 5 safest states in all of Mexico, and also by the New York Post as number 13 in 45 places to visit. Why do I always say this? Because it's a challenge that we've achieved through vision, planning, and execution. We are an example today of yes, we can. Puebla not only grew in tourist arrivals and revenues, but it is benefiting on the great hidden potential of hosting business and conventions. Mexico's most important international tourism event, Tianguis Turístico Mexico. For over 30 years, Mexico has hosted this very important international event where professionals in their field focus on selling Mexico as a destination. It took place in Acapulco for over 30 years. In 2012, it moved to the Rivera Nayarit, which is Puerto Vallarta. And a year later, all eyes were on us because the challenge was on us. We are not a beach destination, and we had to be a success. By the end of the event, we surpassed all numbers and expectations, and thus an important precedent was set worldwide. Mexico is much more than a beach and sun destination. Mexico is culture, it's cuisine, tradition, and history. Mexico is full of experiences. Puebla's effort generated in this Tianguis Turístico in 2013 over 26,000 business appointments, 673 buyers, and 480 stands. The biggest and most successful Tianguis of all. And that was the quote that we basically had received. What did we get from hosting this? We created awareness, where Puebla was definitely not on the map. A chance to show internationally and nationally that we have the resources to hold these sort of events. And tourism-wise, we have everything except the beach. We have cuisine, we have tradition, we have arts. It was a challenge to demonstrate efficient organizing capacity. We have worked on all levels of government, and it's been definitely teamwork. The ability to attend thousands of people simultaneously. This settled an important precedent for daily life in Puebla. The local people rediscovered our tourist attractions and resources, that tourism is an unlimited job and revenue generator, and all tourism does attract investment. Again, I just want to show you on an international level the growth that we've had, over 231%. It's just an amazing, you see it in the streets, you feel it in the restaurants and in the shows and everything that we have. On a national level, we have increased 126% in the last 3.5 years. What's next in Puebla? No one ever imagined that what an amazing tourist attraction Puebla could be today. And we are competing along the other states, such as beach destinations. The Tianguis experience is living proof that with remarkable capacity, organization, teamwork, especially teamwork, determination, and setting goals, that we can go beyond our expectations. We saw potential in tourism in Puebla, the government, our governor, and we seized that opportunity and we went ahead with it, and Puebla definitely has a product. So I invite every one of you to Google Puebla, and just know that Mexico is an amazing destination. It has so much to offer. It's like I said, it's not just the beach. It's great. The beach is great. But today, with the Mexico Tourism Board, we're finding that people want to know a little bit more. And we are that little bit more. So with that, I'd like to thank you all. And I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Miss Wendy Booker. And Wendy Booker is on an amazing journey. Not only is she tackling marathons, mountains, ice, and she's doing it with multiple sclerosis. Diagnosed with a relapsing remitting MS in 1998, Wendy was never an athlete. But over the past decade, she has ran 12 marathons, climbed 6 of the 7 summits, and attempted Everest twice. She has mushed through the North Pole, and she has skied to the South Pole. And she had set records breaking through all barriers. Wendy is now on a mission to become a voice for a patient as a patient advocate and consultant in the healthcare, pharmaceutical, and medical device industry. Her new book, New Altitudes, was released last year. Whatever challenges Wendy undertakes, the mission is always to educate, to motivate, and to challenge anyone facing an obstacle in life, and just to push forward and to climb through, because the view from the top is breathtaking. And just to finish up, just a curious note, talking with Wendy, she has also climbed one of our 3 volcanoes. We have 3. And the name of it is the La Ixtlacíhuatl, which is also has a legend behind it. The Popocatépetl is the warrior, and La Ixtlacíhuatl is the sleeping woman. So it was amazing to know that in 2010, she was in Puebla, she did climb our mountain, and I'm very proud of that. So please join me to welcome Miss Wendy Booker.
I'm so thrilled and excited to be here speaking with all of you today. And I'm going to talk a lot about teamwork, because when you're climbing mountains, it's quite apparent the quality of a good team and a bad team. I have a lot of stories to share. But I started thinking about it, and I'll bet you most of you had to get good teamwork going just to get to Vegas. I noticed I did, and I laugh because the head of my team is my 94-year-old mother who is staying at my house taking care of my 80-pound dog. So we do need to value the players that are in our lives and how they help us achieve our goals. So thanks to Mom, I'm able to be here. Now, I always start out when I talk, and I am personally amazed how far 26.2 miles has taken me. That's the distance of a marathon, but in my case, it truly became the distance of a lifetime. Because I sincerely doubt, in fact, I emphatically know that I never would have taken on running the Boston Marathon had I not been diagnosed with MS. I wasn't an athlete. In fact, I laugh. I took jazzercise. And all of a sudden, I find out I have this disease that takes away one's ability to run and to move and to live the life they thought. And I didn't feel any different than I did the day before I was diagnosed. So upon diagnosis, I decided to take on something that was truly out of character and run that marathon. And that's why I always go back to that 26 miles proved to be a lot more than just that run. Now, over the years and over my exciting journeys and all the things I've been able to do, I've come to define myself by what I call my 3 S's. And we all have them: serendipity, self-discovery, and a whole lot of stubbornness. And I thought if I'm going to use these words, I better look them up, because there's nothing worse than using words that you don't really know what they mean. And I did it the old-fashioned way. I went to the Webster's Dictionary, and I looked up stubbornness. Now, it's not the nicest character quality. In fact, I only got past the first definition, and that was obstinate. Closed the book, but I started to think about stubbornness, and I think it's an okay thing, because stubbornness is what keeps us beating our head against the wall, redefining ourselves, trying despite being told we shouldn't, couldn't, and wouldn't. And so it's that stubbornness that kind of has fueled my fire and made me find a solution. So stubbornness is very important. The second S is serendipity. Now, that's kind of difficult, because serendipity means a fortuitous accident. And I know thinking of putting MS and a fortuitous accident into the same sentence is rather odd. But to me, serendipity, that's the good stuff that happens. And I'm still trying to figure out, would I have recognized the good things had I not been diagnosed with MS? Did getting MS make me more attuned to the good stuff that happens, or did it just happen by accident? So I'm still working on that serendipity piece, but it's the piece that we all deserve. Those really neat things that if we have a voice and a heart that come into our world unexpectedly. That last S, that's self-discovery. That's who we figure out who and what we are now that we have a challenge. And it's not just MS. It could be any challenge. But it's putting together those S's and saying, OK, how am I going to define my life, move forward despite the challenge I've received, and still enjoy living and being a viable, valuable member of my life, my community, my family, whatever our goal may be. So those S's really have played a big time into my story. Now, as I said, I wasn't an athlete. I was diagnosed with MS in June of 1998. And it started out as a numb left leg. Now, I had just taken up the sport of running. I have a little running partner, and the only reason we started to run is we got kicked out of every gym we went to because we talked too much. So we had run out of options. And I noticed that my left leg felt funny. But I figured it was just a running injury, and inevitably I thought of my father. Anytime we'd go out somewhere and we'd pass some guy jogging, my dad would always say, now how good can that sport be? Look how miserable that guy looks. So I thought my dad must be right. It must be this just from running. But I let it go. Then over time, that numbness started to envelop my entire left side. I still kept ignoring it, still kept on running. I lost the vision in my left eye. But by the time I got around to making an eye doctor's appointment, the vision came back. And you know, when you're young and in your 40s, you don't think of this stuff. Actually, in my late 30s, bad health, bad things, just, they don't happen. You push it all aside, and that's what I kept doing. Then finally, I was stepping out of the display window. In my previous life, I was an interior decorator. And I was stepping out of a display window when that left leg gave out and I fell. And that's when I decided I better get some medical help. And after a lot of tests and MRIs and evoked response tests and everything that goes with it, I was diagnosed with MS. Well, it is a life changer. It does take your breath away. But as I said, I started to think I didn't feel any different than the day before. So that's when I started to plot and plan of what could I do despite having this illness. Now, as I said, not an athlete, a casual runner, which means I run for exercise, mental therapy, to collect T-shirts, and so I can eat a lot. There's absolutely no other reason to do that sport. And I run alone or with a group, but my favorite running partner is this little Carol, half my height. We're very obvious when you see us out there. And we would use our runs to talk about our jobs and our kids and our families, and by the time we got home, all we could marvel at is how far we had been and how awesome it was. Well, of course, MS changed that direction too, but not necessarily in a bad way. But instead of focusing on running, I started to get satisfaction just from the fact I could still run. Now, remember those 3 S's that keep weaving in and out of my life? Almost to the day of my diagnosis with MS, Carol was diagnosed with breast cancer. She's doing awesome. But it was really interesting to both of us that even though the illness was different, the challenge is the same. When you hear any kind of challenge, losing a job, an illness, there's a million of them. It takes your breath away. It stops you in your tracks. Life as you knew it is different. And it was easy for Carol and I to ping it off of each other because our journey was so similar. It really helped to have a buddy going through this. And I started to realize what happens to us. We become immobilized. We don't want to look to the past because now we're mourning what we think we've lost. We don't want to look to the future because it's so frighteningly unpredictable that we get stuck in this here and now, this pity party that I refer to as lay on the couch, eat bonbons, and watch Oprah. And so that's exactly what I did. I'm losing my microphone. There it comes. That's what you want to do. You're immobilized. You don't want to go anywhere. You want to pull those covers over your head and just stay there and hide. And that's fine. You can visit that. You just can't stay there. And my mission has been to go on living. And as I said, Carol and I had a similar journey. Now, I love to talk about her because there's nothing nicer than throwing a friend under the bus. And she's not here to defend herself. About a year after our diagnosis, Carol called me up out of the blue, and she said, why don't we run the Boston Marathon? And I swear it sounded like she said, why don't we go to the mall? And I'm thinking, now that's not a bad idea. And our plan was not to tell anybody. We really weren't that committed to the sport. We weren't sure if we could run 5 miles, let alone 26. And we figured if we didn't tell anybody, the less embarrassed we would be if we really decided not to do it and bailed out. And then our plan was that on the day, if we actually made it that far, on the day of the race, we would jump in and be what's called a bandit. Now, a bandit is an unofficial entrant. They don't get that number. And our thinking is, who's going to notice 2 middle-aged women when there's 40,000 runners? Nobody. And we'd get the personal satisfaction of having run the Boston Marathon. And both of us, of course, were doing it to defy our diseases. Well, the weeks went by, the running got harder, the miles picked up, and it was really a lot of work. And about 6 weeks before the marathon, we came to the conclusion that we were suffering terribly, and we wanted everybody to know about it. And the only way we now were going to get the notoriety we felt we deserved was to get one of those numbers to be officially into the race. Well, never having run a marathon, let alone Boston, I didn't know that if you're not fast, you can't get in. And oh, I forgot to tell you that MS and speed were never going to go into the same sentence. But anyway, I didn't know any of this. But I did find out that you can run for one of the charities, and there's a lot of them. Team in Training, leukemia, arthritis. Sure enough, the MS Society has numbers. And Carol and I are thinking, this is easy. This should be a shoo-in. What are actually the odds of people running for a charity that have the disease? So we figured we'd get a number with no problem. I call the MS Society up. I get a very nice, polite, but firm girl on the phone. I said, my name is Wendy Booker, and I'd like to run the Boston Marathon. Oh, she said, I'm sorry, we have a waiting list for next year of 150 runners. Well, I figured Carol would get a number. I mean, who's going to turn down someone with breast cancer? She never spoke to a human. She went through one of those voice messaging systems. Well, you know how you want something, but you didn't know you wanted it till you're told you couldn't have it, then you wanted it more than you thought you did in the first place? We had to get a number. So the next day, I call that woman back. I said, I'm the lady who called you yesterday. I got that same polite, firm girl. And I said, would it help if I told you I have MS? I got a number within an hour, 18,694. Now, Carol still had not spoken to a human. So we came up with what I still think is the best known plan to man. Take the number, tear it in half. I'd be 186. Carol would be the 94. And as long as we crossed the finish line together, no one would be the wiser, except the MS Society. They were furious that we were going to take that number and tear it in half. So they got Carol a number as well. And now we're in. We are officially entered into the Boston Marathon. Now there was a little problem. We weren't paying attention. We weren't reading the fine print. And when we took these numbers, we signed a contract. And the contract said that we would raise $2,000 apiece. We had 1 month to do it. And just to be sure we were good for our word, they took our credit cards. I'm in trouble. How am I going to justify a $2,000 charge for a race that I'm still thinking if I'm not having fun, I'm going to the mall? We were really panicked, and we went public. We went everywhere. We went to the newspaper, radio, television. None of you would have been safe. I would have hit you all up for money. And remember, it was easier for me. I have MS, and in that 1 month, I was able to raise over $7,000. Now, I felt terrible. Here's poor Carol. She doesn't even have my disease. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Anything I make over $2,000, I'll share with you, so you're not in trouble. Stubborn comes with breast cancer as well. She's a stubborn little cuss, and she said, I don't want your money. And she, on her own, raised over $2,000 for MS. Now, it's interesting because I'm not here to talk people into running a marathon. But all of a sudden, I started to think about my journey to that point. And right away, I could see a team forming. MS is an interesting illness. We don't have it alone. It really affects everybody around us, at work, at our church, where we hang out, our friends, our family. They all take it on. But there's always one voice that comes through loud and clear above all others. And really, that was Carol in my case. That's that team leader, that person who hears your song, who doesn't think you're whacked when you call him in the middle of the night, who takes on all your stupid ideas as if she likes to. And Carol really became what I consider my caregiver, that very first person who set me on my path to what it has meant to have MS. And that's where all our journeys start. And sometimes we don't even realize we're putting together a team, but it's that collective voice that wants the common goal, who wants to see you succeed, and who's there cheering you on despite their own problems, which is why I always want to add Carol to my story, because she was fighting her own battle with breast cancer and truly gave life and limb to me in my marathon. Now, again, she's not here, so I have one more story about her, and then I'll move on. But after we went public in the newspaper and everybody knew about us, we were running one last run shortly before the marathon. And we were out and about, and Carol's from Gloucester. And you probably know Gloucester, Massachusetts from the perfect storm, and now Wicked Tuna is the new thing there. But she's a Gloucester girl, and I'm just a transplant, so everybody knows her. Anyway, we were out running, and a car drove up, rolled down his window, and handed Carol a $100 bill. Now, you never give a runner cash. For the next hour, we're thinking manicure, marathon, massage, MS. We turned the money in, but to this day, we still laugh about all the things we could have done with it. And so I look back, and that's where my journey, like I said, really started. And it was Carol who launched that team of saying anything is possible. Let's see what we can do despite our diseases. Now, my family and friends thought I'd have this marathon out of my system, that life would go back to normal, that I'd go back to the interior design and the soccer mom. But I decided I had to run that marathon one more time because somehow I didn't remember crossing the finish line the year before, and I thought it might have been a fluke. So I decided to do it again, and it was much more difficult. I went into the training with an injury. It was a horrible winter to be out there, and little Carol really meant it when she got to the top of Heartbreak Hill and said, "Don't ever ask me to do this again." She hated the entire experience, which makes her value to me even greater because she didn't like running. She has never run again, but she did it for me. Anyway, I missed her. I thought, now what am I going to do? So I decided to get a coach. I thought, you know, I'm going to take this sport on with much more responsibility. I'm actually going to try to become a real runner. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking maybe I could qualify for Boston. And I found a coach, and her name was Courtney. Courtney had done really well in the Philadelphia Marathon. And so she was very intrigued about taking on this middle-aged woman with MS as a client. And Courtney started to train me. Well, Courtney quickly found out that speed and MS were never going to go in the same sentence. But Courtney didn't give up on me. And instead of working on personal records and on training and all the things that go into being a good runner, Courtney started to teach me about mental toughness, both as it applies to sport, but more importantly, as it applies to life. And Courtney taught me that in our lifetime, we meet angels. Now, I'm not talking the glowy, fluffy kind like you see on television, but I'm talking about people you meet who motivate you in ways you never expected. Now, the Boston Marathon route is loaded with angels. There's little kids, and they have orange slices in their hands, and they're all sticky, and they want to touch you, and they want to high-five you. Or the Harley-Davidson guys, and they're all sticky, and they want to touch you, and they want to high-five you. Or the Boston College student at mile 23 who has a beer in his hand, and he says, "You look terrific." Well, as I said, it was a really bad year for me, and I wasn't feeling terrific at all. And I had about 2 miles to go, and I was coming to the conclusion I wasn't going to make it. Well, that's part of the sport. That's why they have ambulances and medical tents and buses to take you back. And I was trying to figure out the best way to get out of here, and there's lots of crowds, and it's high anxiety. And I'm thinking, was I going to walk? Was I going to crawl? Was I going to throw up? Whatever it wasn't going to be pretty. And while I was going through this dilemma, I noticed out of the corner of my eye what turned out to be my angel. He came in the form of the largest Boston City police officer I'd ever seen. He was leaning against a pillar, looking at all of us, looking thoroughly bored, and wishing us slower runners would hurry up and get done so he could go home. Well, I saw him, but I couldn't react to anything but get me out of here. And I decided I was finished, and I came to a stop right there in the middle of the road. And that policeman came over from where he was standing, put his finger in my face and said, "I didn't stand here all day to watch you stumble and fall. Now dig in." Dig in. By the way, that was my fastest mile, but dig in. That policeman, without ever realizing it, set me on my path to what it means to have MS, to have a challenge. Dig in. And again, I want to go back. When I speak to an MS audience, I say to them, I'm not here to talk you into running a marathon. I'm here to challenge you. I'm here to say, go out and see what you can do despite this challenge. Life is so much more interesting. Don't sit on the couch. Don't lay there and watch Oprah. Go out and live despite the disease. And you'll find out the things you can do, not what the disease has taken away, but what it has added. And so that's where I really started going from there, and it got bigger and bigger. Well, how do you get from a marathon to a mountain? The short answer is you open your big mouth. As you can see, I'm okay doing that. In fact, every report card I ever brought home said Wendy is an incessant chatterbox. And my father would pound his fist on the kitchen table and say there has to be something she can do with that mouth of hers. So I came to this quite naturally, but I am really one of those who opens my mouth before I think, you know, insert foot. And that's exactly what happened. After I ran that very first marathon, I was invited to speak at the American Neurological Foundation, 1,800 neurologists. After I was done speaking, I was invited out to a very elegant restaurant, big round table, and at this table were all the top doctors, pharmaceutical companies, public relations firm, all the who's who of the MS world, and Alan Osmond, Donny Osmond's brother. Now, I fixated. The doctors are talking about mice models and T1 cells and blood-brain barrier, and I kept turning to Alan Osmond going, how many kids do you have? And 2 seconds later, how do you guys do Christmas? And these doctors, I'm sure, are going, who invited the dits? But I missed all that. I just had eyes for Alan. Well, the conversation at the dinner table changed and came around to mountain climbing. And somebody asked me if I had ever climbed. And I proudly named off 2 mountains in New Hampshire that I now know to be foothills. Absolutely, I've climbed. The woman to my left, who was with a very prominent public relations company, said, we've had an opportunity come up. There's a gentleman from Boulder, Colorado, who has multiple sclerosis, and he's looking to put the first team of climbers with MS on Denali. I can't even say it with a straight face, because immediately I'm thinking, Denali, doesn't that sound hot and tropical? I'm thinking pina coladas. I'm thinking must be in Hawaii. And I'm thinking, I just ran the Boston Marathon. How hard can a mountain named Denali be? I'm your woman. Now, the dinner ended, and in my defense, back then, if Google had been what it is today, I would not be standing here speaking to you, because if I'd gone home and Googled Denali, I would have found out it's a car and a mountain, and there's no way I would ever have attempted it. But ignorance is truly bliss. I didn't know what Denali was. And weeks went by, and I finally called that woman back. It was killing me. And I said to her, that Denali, where is it? Alaska. Damn. I'm thinking, the first thought I'm thinking, it's going to be cold. I said, well, that's funny. The only mountain I've ever heard of is McKinley. Same mountain. I said, oh, wait a minute. You know those two I talked to you about that I climbed in New Hampshire? I think I was 10, and I don't even think I got to the top. You're now talking, I didn't even have words to say what I all of a sudden visualized was going to happen. I said, I have to think about this. This is a big mountain. And she said, well, we'll give you time. In fact, they gave me 6 months to get my head around it. And during that next 6 months, I got my hands on anything and everything I could read about McKinley or Denali. And I laughed because the very first book I got was aptly titled Surviving Denali. And the book is broken down into chapters according to the death and mayhem on the mountain. And what's really interesting is at the end of every chapter is a chart. And the chart lists the climber's name, what country he came from, what happened to him, where it happened to him, and how much it cost the federal government to remove his body from the mountain. And I took jazzercise. Well, it was really a struggle. I really couldn't make up my mind. I started to drive everybody in my world crazy, which is not the way to make a decision. Anybody who would come into my world, I'd say, would you do it? What do you think if you were me? And I was getting so many conflicting answers that I realized the only way I could clearly come up with an answer as to whether I wanted to get involved or not was from within. So once I settled down and got quiet, I started to think about it, and I thought, never in my life was I going to be offered this opportunity. It was so out of character that it was almost a crazy thing for me to even contemplate, but I was so intrigued by the fact that I wanted to try it. The second part of our mission was to encourage the newly diagnosed to get on one of the MS therapies that were just coming out, so there was a lot of educating to do. And the third component was to show the world what people with MS are capable of. And so with those three in mind, I became the sole woman on a 7-man team, MS on Denali, 2002. Now I'm going to deviate from my usual story here, because now it's time to talk about team building. The classic answer, we didn't summit, by the way. And we usually say to people, we didn't summit because of weather. That's a pat answer for mountain climbers, because who is going to check? Anyway, that's what we said. We didn't summit because of weather. This was so poignant, speaking with all of you today. I hate to start out with bad team building, but I'm going to start out with what happens when you are on a bad team. These 7 men and I had no right to be on that mountain. We didn't have a distinctive, clear leader with a clear vision. We didn't have enough experience. Some of us showed up, not me, but I won't use names, wearing equipment they had never used before. There was a lot of mixed messages. There wasn't a concise, too many chiefs, not enough Indians is the best way I can describe it. But now I look back and it's amazing that we didn't die up there, because we were so ill-prepared for that mountain and what it meant. And it really was because of the lack of a good team that we did not summit. And we didn't have a right to summit. We didn't earn it. Because part of being a good team is bringing your strength and your value to that team. And none of us, myself included, I was too much of a novice to say, what can I offer to this team to get to the top? But in analyzing it, it is remarkable to me how valuable a team is and how much it has played into my future peaks, and the ones that I did summit and the ones that I didn't. And the reasons why usually does come down to the team, to that leader, to those people that are there and share your voice. So we didn't summit, and I was devastated, because I had by that time given 2 years to train. I'd given up my job as an interior designer. I spent a good portion of my life somewhere on some mountain learning to become a climber. And so I went back to my original sponsors, who were a pharmaceutical company, and I said, I need to go back. They said, no. They said, we're in the business of saving lives, not killing people by putting them on Denali. I'm thinking, really? But I kept after them. And I said, you don't get it. This has nothing to do with the mountain. It has everything to do with MS. The mountain I use as a metaphor for what life with MS is really like. We can't always get to the top. We have to take a little longer, try a little harder, dig a little deeper. But we can do it. And just by the virtue of what a climb on a mountain like McKinley is like, it's just like life with MS. You're dizzy, you want to go home, you want your mother, you can't see. All of those things play into it. So the physical act of climbing really came to represent to me a day-to-day life living with this challenge. And they said yes. Now it's kind of interesting when you have a pharmaceutical company rather vulnerable, I guess is the best way to say it. I knew that they said yes to this, and I thought, I'm not going to stop asking. So while I had them in that moment, I said, I don't just want McKinley. I want something called the 7 summits, the highest mountain on each of the 7 continents. Watch what you wish for, because they said yes. And so in June of 2004, I became the first woman with MS to summit Mount McKinley. Now again, I can go back to a team. This time, having done so poorly on that first time on McKinley, having seen what a bad team can do, while I was on that mountain, I started looking at the other teams who were successful and what made them good. How come they got to the top and I didn't? Communication, respect, a strong leader. I keep going back to that strong leader. Valuing each person and what they bring to the table, what they can do to the climb, what they can do to the goal, how they can help you achieve it. And it happened over and over again. So when it became my turn to return to McKinley, the first thing I did was look for that valuable team. This time it was 11 men and myself. The leader is who was the best of this because he respected each of us for what we had done, what we had accomplished, and what we could bring to the game. And when we faced situations, he would let us change our roles, which is also part of a valuable team, saying, you know, you were really good at this spot, so why don't you try doing this next time? All of that added to my success, and had it not been for these 11 men, I don't think I would have reached the top, because each of us valued what we were, who we were, and what we brought to that mountain. Now I'm going to deviate a minute from the mountains, because this story always intrigues me, and I call it the Dolphin Darlings. After that first mountain, I was invited to speak on a cruise. Now, that's not a tough job to take, especially when you live in cold, dark New England, and I was invited to go on a cruise, so I took a friend of mine named Maida. And you know, on these cruises, you get to pick a shore trip. So we picked to go to Jamaica and swim with the dolphins. And the day came, we were offloaded from the ship, and it was an MS cruise. So there were a lot of folks who had this disease. And with us came 5 women. And we met down at the bottom of the ship. We got on a little bus, and they were all in wheelchairs. And this bus took us to the dolphin swim. And when we were offloaded, it was very difficult terrain to get down to the water. There were rocks and tree roots and dirt, and these women were great. They all went bumping down there. They were all very positive, and we get down to the water. And the Jamaican hostess says, go and enjoy our beautiful beach. It's going to be at least 2 hours till you get to swim with the dolphins. So my friend Maida and I put our blankets out. We're looking at this incredible view, and it's, like I said, not very hard to take. And we turn around, and there are those 5 women stuck in the sand. They couldn't get down to the beach. Well, all of a sudden, the beach didn't look that good to us. Maida was furious and went off to tell the management that this was unacceptable. And fortunately, they had put a tarp over them so they weren't sitting out there in the tropical sun. Well, I decided I was going to go up and talk to them. And I went up to the girl closest to me, and her name was Tammy, and I just chose her because she was closest. Isn't this awesome? We're going to get to swim with the dolphins? Oh, she said, we're not here to swim. We just came to watch. I said, you came all this way to watch people swim with the dolphins? She said, well, we're in wheelchairs. Now, I had seen them get off that bus. And I said, well, your arms still work. They were good. Oh, yeah. I said, well, do you know how to swim? Oh, yeah, she said, I'm from Tampa. Before I went into this wheelchair, I was a really good swimmer. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm a good swimmer. I'll help you. We'll get you into a life jacket. I'll help you get into the water. Well, she's looking at me like, yeah, right, lady. I don't know who you are, but I know you have MS. And I couldn't get her to budge. And I kept pushing and pushing. And I said, well, you know my friend Maida, she doesn't have MS. She'll get in the water with you. No, Tammy wasn't going to do it. She wasn't feeling comfortable. And then I kept saying to her, well, how many times are you going to get to come to Jamaica? You got to try it. What's the worst? I'll be here. And all of a sudden, I got to see her what I go around and talk about. I got to see her dig in. She said, you know what? You're right. I'm going to do it. I'm going to swim with the dolphins. And I'm like, yeah, what I hadn't counted on, the other 4 women. Well, if Tammy's going to do it, so are we. Now, I acted like that was part of our decision. The only one who had that deer in the headlight look was my poor friend Maida. When she came back, I said, see these 5 women? We're going to get them in the water. It wasn't as easy as we made it out to be. We got them into life jackets. 4 of them, Maida and I, were able to help, 1 of us on each side. The 5th girl, we got a Jamaican gentleman who was nice enough to carry Becky down. We sat them on a wooden platform. We had to go down a set of stairs to this submerged platform, sat them there, and we pushed them in. I don't even remember the dolphins. I can't believe we did this. These women were swimming. You couldn't tell they had MS except for 5 empty wheelchairs on the shore. People on the shoreline were taking pictures. When we got back to the ship that night, that's all everybody talked about, these 5 women who had gotten out of the wheelchair, had gotten in the water, and were swimming with the dolphins. But the best, the very best, is about 3 years ago, I got an email from Tammy. Tammy Dunn from Tampa, Florida, sent me an email. She's teaching scuba diving. That's what I'm talking about. That's my mission. That became part of my team. That was the successful goal that I hadn't even realized was the goal. But this woman has taken what she learned that day with those dolphins and gone way above and beyond whatever anybody thought was possible. And that's why I continue to keep on with these crazy adventures I'm doing, because her story, there's so many out there. And it's really about giving people permission, telling people they have a choice in life, lay on that couch or go on living. And that's what I have chosen to do and hope to share and keep on going ahead. So anyway, after Denali, the mountains kind of came quickly. Interestingly enough, though, as I referred to before, anytime I was not with a good team, things didn't go as well. And sometimes I was the weak member of the team, which is really hard to personally say, wow, it was me this time around that didn't bring success. That happened with my second mountain called Aconcagua. That's the highest in South America. It's the highest outside of Nepal, and it's the 13th highest mountain in the world. I went to that mountain ill-prepared emotionally. I was going through a divorce, and I never recognized that the emotional component and how it affects a goal, how it affects a team, and how it affected me personally. And because of I figured getting on that mountain would take me away from all my problems back home, and instead it only highlighted them. And so at 16,000 feet, I knew I had to go home, that I couldn't pull it off. Once again, 2 mountains down, took me twice to get to the top. I shelved Aconcagua for a while, and then went on and did Kilimanjaro. Again, a good, strong team, no problem summiting. And I went back to do Aconcagua and summited that one, I think, in 2007. But it really did start to highlight over and over again who you're with, your common goal, the strength in your leadership, and that how you play into that whole big picture. Well, then it finally came time for Everest. And I kept leaving Everest to the end for a lot of reasons, because it is Everest. The Chinese government actually played into my decision as well. My intent was to climb a mountain in Tibet in 2008 called Cho-Yu, which is a very good training mountain for Everest. That was the year of the Summer Olympics in Beijing, and the Chinese closed the country, especially to the Sherpa. So we were unable to climb any of the mountains in Tibet that year because of the Olympics. And so we had to change our goal, and we decided to stay in Nepal. Now, why I bring this up is it, for me, became a life-changing decision, basically brought on by the Chinese. So I climbed a mountain in Nepal called Barunse, another epic climb. And while I was climbing, there was another team, and 4 Sherpas fell, and 1 was killed. The climbing stopped. Everybody had to go into a rescue mode, make sure everybody was safe, get the injured people down. And I started to inquire after all of that was done, and found out that this gentleman who passed away left behind an 18-year-old wife and an 18-month-old daughter. I said, what happens to them? Well, no one had a good answer. What usually happens to these poor women is they go back to their families, but Nepal is the 9th poorest country in the world, and they don't have a lot, and they're very nomadic and agrarian, so she can try to go to her family, but there isn't much there. The next thing she'll try to do is panhandle during the trekking season, which is in the spring and fall, going along the path that all the climbers and trekkers are on to try to get money. And the last option, which most of them do, is they go to Kathmandu with their baby. And the problem is that human trafficking is huge, and all of a sudden mother and daughter disappear. Well, I'd been given so many incredible opportunities, had seen so much of the world by this time, that I knew I wanted in some way to pay it forward. I just didn't know how. And here all of a sudden it was, this opportunity to raise this little girl. And so through a lot of networking and challenges, just getting money to Nepal to see that it got to this child, I started raising this child whose name is Anja Furi. Well, as luck would have it, again, remember my 3 S's, serendipitously, I was also working at an inner city school in Boston, sharing with the children who are from El Salvador and Dominican Republic the world. and their place in the world and the choices they can make and all those things that fourth graders who have a really tough life, these kids are really challenged educationally, socially, physically, to show them that the world goes far beyond their school walls in East Boston and how they can contribute to the world. And so with these children's help, in 2008, I formed a foundation called the Other Side of Everest Educational Foundation, whereby the children who are challenged here in the United States are raising the money for the child of this one child, now we have more, the children of Nepal who have lost their fathers in climbing accidents. And it was interesting to me that had not everything combined, how was it that the Chinese said I couldn't be in Tibet and that this gentleman died and I got this disease, that all of a sudden, in my own little way, I'm able to change the world. We've now built a whole school there called Home Away from Home. The amount of children, unfortunately, has gone up because of all the horrific events that happened on Everest this year. But it laid into this because this was my prelude to what life in Nepal is like and what Everest is. So after 2008, the foundation is chugging along. I could have picked up many, many more children, but I've had to be very careful because of the collecting the money and fundraising. But in 2009, I made my first attempt on Everest. Once again, it was the team that was a problem. But I'm not going to dwell on that. But anyway, I got up to about 23,000 feet on what's called the Lhotse face, and all of a sudden I realized that I was really having trouble with my MS. At that point on a big peak, you start to analyze, what does this really mean? Is it mental? Is it physical? Am I crazy? But you know you're tied to others, and your decision is irrevocably going to change everybody's life. If you make a bad decision, you're not the only one who could go down. And so I decided to come back, leave Nepal and come back to the US. Now I decided to go back again in 2010. Probably not a good decision, partly because it was too soon. Everest takes almost 3 months to climb. It's a very difficult environment. There's not a lot of showering. There's not a lot of hygiene. And living on the side of that mountain for that long really takes away a lot of what you want and like, and it's awful. It's just terrible. But anyway, I went back in 2010 because I was so anxious. I wanted to check this off. I wanted to get done. The exact same thing happened, almost at the exact same place. And the belief became that it was because of the lack of oxygen for that prolonged a time. MS is a disease of the central nervous system. I wasn't getting enough oxygen to the brain, and that's why I was having so much trouble with my disease. And so I had to come back. And the very first thing I did when I got back to the US, lay on the couch, eat bonbons, and watch Oprah. And my reason is I was a fake. I hadn't achieved my goal. How can I go around the country and tell people to go climb their own mountain, to surpass the MS, to try something, to find something they're passionate about when I couldn't do it? And I realized that Everest is a lofty goal, but it was mine. And I had been working on it for 8 years. And what was the one thing that took it away? MS. And what does MS do? It takes away our ability to move. It takes away our choices. It relegates us to a wheelchair. It takes away all the things that we know and love. But then, after 3 months of feeling miserably sorry for myself, I started to think. And I thought, well, what is Everest? It's the top of the world. But is it really? And so in April of 2011, I became the first person living with MS to go to the North Pole, the geographical top of the world. And I totally changed my mission by saying, MS took away my dream to get to the top of Everest, but it didn't stop me from my goal. I just changed how I got there. And that has become for me the ultimate high to say, okay, I couldn't get to the top of the world on Everest, I just found another way. We all have that ability in us. Remember, it's about educating yourself, challenging yourself, choices, and really permission. Permission to say, if I can't get to that goal one way, how's another way I might be able to do it? And who is sharing that vision with me to help me get to that goal? And so since I did the North Pole, I had to do the South. You know, if you're going to do the bottom, you might as well do the, yeah. So in 2012, in honor of the 100th anniversary of the discovery of the pole, I was able to stand on the North Pole exactly 100 years from the day it was found. That was the best team I was ever on, was that South Pole mission. It's a very boring trip. The top of our world or the bottom of the world is as flat as a pancake. And it's 10,000 feet high, which people don't realize even though it's flat. And for days, you're hallucinating because you see nothing but snow and ice. And so there comes in this team of players, one from Canada, one from Australia, 2 of us from the United States, And because of their personalities and their temperament, we got through a miserable situation of weeks and weeks of cross-country skiing to the South Pole. A lot of good humor, a lot of liquor, but we made it. There's a drink in South America called Pisco Sour, and yes, it does go to the South Pole very easily. Anyway, I look at that, and that really, we're still very much in touch. We're planning out another mission. We can't wait to go again. And so I want to go back to why it is that I'm here today. My whole mission has become to educate, motivate, and challenge. And not just people with MS, but in general, because as I've traveled around, I feel like so many of us get stuck in a rut only because we're told you shouldn't, you couldn't, you wouldn't. You're the only one who can decide that. No one else can make that choice for you. You have to be educated. I really did go off on that first Denali trip pretty non-educated, and look what happened. But if you have all your ducks in a row, if you really know and are valuing what you can do and why you want to do it and have some substantiating evidence behind this that you can make it happen, what's to stop you? Now I say to people with MS, maybe your challenge is going from your sofa to your mailbox and without your wheelchair. Maybe it's using your walker or maybe using a cane. And maybe it takes you 10 times to get that journey going. And maybe you only get as far as your kitchen. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Not only did you do it, you did it with MS. You did it, and therefore, by virtue of trying, you're already a winner. We all can do that. We all have that ability to say, okay, I tried. I tried to the best of my ability. It didn't work. I had to change my goal, but I still was successful. And that's where all the people behind you, cheering you on, helping you make this choice, become that valuable team. That collaborative effort of saying, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve, how am I going to make it happen? And it goes so easily from there, because when it's right, it really is right. So my next adventure, don't leave me alone too long, because I start to dream up all sorts of stuff. In 1925, the children of Nome, Alaska were dying of diphtheria. There was no way to get the drugs to them, except for one very famous dog whose statue is in Central Park named Balto. In 1973, they recreated what was then called the Serum Run, and it became what we now refer to as the Iditarod. I decided 2 years ago, in 2012, that I wanted to run the Iditarod. It takes 3 years to train for it, and my mission is I want to become the first person with MS to make it from Anchorage to Nome to show how far we have come with multiple sclerosis. Just like that very first run to get the serum to these children to save their lives, that's how I want to carve out my mission. I started training, as I said, it's a 3-year training. Talk about a team. My team went from humans to 70 dogs, which you then whittled down to 16 dogs. I like dogs, but there's a difference between the 80-pounder at home and the 70 who are working dogs. So there's a true value there of who is a team leader, who's going to be in the back and be the muscles, and poor me, the musher. Well, it's a wonderful sport, but unfortunately my funding ran out. So I'm now back to being in Boston, calculating how I'm going to put that team together to get back up to Alaska to continue with that mission of running the Iditarod. But like I say, don't leave me alone too long, because the Iditarod may not happen, something else will come along. There's always another adventure around that corner. And again, I'll go back. I'm not here to talk you into a marathon. I'm not here to talk you into climbing the 7 summits, unless you want to, because I always would love company. I am here to challenge you to be the best person you can be, given the situation around you, given the challenges that we each face, be it physical, emotional, mental, the job, making choices and stand clear with your conviction of that choice. Because we all have mountains. You can go around them, you can go through them, you can get to the top. But I promise you, the view from the top is incredible. Thank you so much for hearing me out today, for making the world a better place, and joining on that team. Thank you, thank you. Thank you again. Thank you for attending. I hope you've had a great week here in Vegas. I don't know how you can help not having a great week in Vegas. And I'll be signing my book over at the IMAX booth, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And remember, there's always an adventure out there.